What I'm going to do now is create an empty clone of the Northwind database, one that's ready to migrate data into. Either migrate data or create new data in the new database. Okay, so I'm going to start out here in Object Explorer. And first thing I need to do is add the new database. So I'll right-click, Add New Database, and I'll name this new database Southwind. And now the database exists within that instance of SQL Server. Now I want to compare the schema of the Northwind database to the schema of the Southwind database. So as you can imagine, the comparison is going to find a lot of objects in Northwind that aren't in Southwind, because Southwind is a brand new empty database that I just created. So I'll right-click on Northwind and select Schema Compare. And that opens up this Schema Comparison Designer and gives it the default name of SQL Schema Compare 1. At the top of the window, I have these two drop-down list boxes. Because I right-clicked on Northwind and selected Schema Compare from there, the designer already populated the source database with Northwind. But now I have to select the target. So I'll click on that, and I'll select Select Target. And as you can see, I have several options. I can compare the Northwind database to a project, to a database, or to a data tier application file. But in this case, I want to compare two databases, Northwind and another database, so I'll leave the default radio button set. And then I'll choose the database. Notice that I already have a connection to the Southwind database, but if I didn't, I would just click the New Connection button and fill in the information here in order to connect to the Southwind database. I don't need to do that, so I'll cancel out of this and select it right here. All right, I'll click on OK, and now we've selected the target database. If I wanted to change the default options for the comparison, I could click on this Options dialog right there. Take two. I can click on this Options icon right there. As you can see, there's a huge number of options that you can change. It essentially determines what objects are ignored and how some of the comparisons are made. I can also select to include just specific object types. But in this case, I'm going to compare all of the objects within the Northwind database. So I don't need to change any options, so I'll cancel out of that dialog box. The comparison is set up the way I want it, so I'll go ahead and click on the Compare button there, and that starts the schema comparison. The window provides a status bar as it progresses. You can see that down in the lower right. And then eventually will display an updated window with the differences it detected. Now, since Southwind is an empty database, the window is going to display what actions are necessary to create all of the Northwind database objects in the Southwind database. And there we go. We have our results. Now, the way this works is that you can select to include different objects. And that's what these checkboxes are. So if I uncheck that, then it's not going to create the categories table within the database, within the target database. Except there's a little bit of a problem here. Notice that when I clicked on it, it was just disabled. It wasn't cleared. On the other hand, if I were to clear this one, the customer demo, the check mark goes away. The difference here is that other tables in the database or other objects, could be stored procedures, views, functions, whatever, depend on categories. So I have to create categories, otherwise I break referential integrity in the target database. So it's only going to remove categories if I remove all of the dependencies on categories. All right, so I'm not going to get rid of any objects. I'm going to include them all. And notice that I can't even add it back. If I don't make any other changes, it's going to put it into the target database. All right, these green pluses mean that all of these objects are going to be added to the target database. If I was comparing two databases that both had objects, then I would get a variety of icons there, depending on whether I needed to delete an object, to update an object because its schema changed, or whatever. And then down in the lower part of the screen here has the code that is going to need to be executed in order to create the object in the target database. And once again, if Southwind had objects, or actually, if both databases had objects with the same name, then down here, it would have the target object definition, the current definition, and then you could see what changes would need to be made to that object in Southwind in order to get it to the same schema as in Northwind. All right, so you can select different tables and view. Notice that you get this really nice little graphic here that shows where you are in the overall source. As I move up and down, it displays. So if you have a long table definition or stored procedure definition or whatever, then you can kind of see where you are in the code. And of course, you can change the size of the window and so forth. And I'll scroll down here. Notice we have a lot of views. We have some procedures there. Okay? And there's the code that creates a particular stored procedure. Notice that the designer has various toolbar buttons. For example, you can generate the script. Talked about the options. You can also group results. And you can do that in various kinds of categories. You can also filter on different objects. If you have a database with a huge number of objects, it might be hard to find stuff. So you could filter, for example, on all objects that have customer in the name. And you can clear the filter. And then you can also move up and down within the list of items. All right, I'm done exploring the comparison. So now I'm going to update the database. And so this is going to update the target, which is the Southwind database. So I'll go ahead and click on that. Are you sure that you want to update the target? This is a very good warning because this is going to make changes, permanent, undoable changes to that target database. I want to do that, so I'll click on yes. And once again, we get the Data Tool Operations window. That indicates that we successfully created the database script and then executed the script on the database Southwind. Now I can go back into Object Explorer and take a look at Southwind and see that, in fact, we do have all of the Northwind tables, all of the Northwind views once it refreshes, and can continue to scroll down and look at all of the various objects. But it's important to understand that if I come back up here to tables and I right-click on categories, for example, and view data, the table is empty. So what I did is I used schema compare to compare the two schemas, the two databases, but nothing I've done populated any of those tables with data. So now I can use features of data tools to generate insert statements in order to insert the data, or use integration services or whatever.